You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. What if I told you that most sexless marriages don't begin with a lack of love, attraction, or even desire, but with small, ignored shifts you barely notice until silence replaces intimacy? What if the problem isn't her, isn't you, and isn't time itself, but patterns you've unknowingly reinforced for years? If you're watching this, chances are you feel it. The distance, the quiet rejection, the unspoken frustration you carry alone while pretending everything is fine. You might still live together, talk every day, share responsibilities, but something essential is missing. And the most dangerous part, you've started to believe this is just how marriage ends up. It doesn't. Stoic philosophy teaches that decay never happens all at once. It happens gradually through neglect, avoidance, and misplaced priorities. A sexless marriage is not a mystery, it's a signal, a warning, and more importantly, a chance to course correct before resentment hardens into permanence. In this video, I'll break down 10 uncomfortable but crucial reasons this happens, and why most men never see them coming. Watch until the very end, because the final reason is the one that quietly determines whether intimacy can ever return, or whether the distance becomes permanent. Number 1. Emotional disconnection and unresolved resentment. When intimacy disappears, it rarely vanishes overnight. It erodes quietly, almost politely, through emotional distance and resentment that was never named, never resolved, just carried. And here's the uncomfortable truth you need to hear. Desire cannot live where emotional safety has died. You can't fake closeness. You can't negotiate attraction. You can't logic your way back into intimacy if what sits between you and your partner is unspoken bitterness. Warned, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. When your inner world is full of quiet anger, disappointment, or suppressed hurt, it stains everything, including the bedroom. Resentment doesn't announce itself loudly. It builds when expectations go unmet and remain unaddressed. It grows when you swallow words to keep the peace, when you compromise your needs repeatedly, when you tell yourself it's not worth the argument. But every unspoken grievance doesn't disappear. It lodges itself into your nervous system. Over time, your body remembers what your mouth refused to say. Touch begins to feel unsafe. Vulnerability feels risky. Desire shuts down not out of spite but out of self-protection. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Translation: you must be willing to face discomfort, to say what you've been avoiding, to look clumsy and exposed, because silence is far more destructive than awkward honesty. Emotional disconnection isn't just about lack of communication. It's about misalignment of inner worlds. You can talk daily and still feel unseen. You can coexist efficiently and still feel lonely. When resentment sits unresolved, your nervous system stays on guard. Intimacy requires relaxation, and resentment creates tension. You may not consciously think about the old wounds anymore, but your body hasn't forgotten them. Stoicism teaches that suppressed emotion doesn't vanish. It governs you quietly. Seneca wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity." Unfaced emotional adversity doesn't harden you. It weakens your capacity for closeness. Now here's the empowering part. This is not a life sentence, but it does require action. Not blame, not keeping score. Action. Start with radical self-honesty. Ask yourself without defensiveness what resentment you're carrying, not what your partner did wrong, but what you allowed to go unresolved. Where did you abandon your voice? Where did you betray your own needs? Stoicism is not about emotional suppression, it's about emotional clarity. You cannot heal what you refuse to name. Write it down. Not to accuse, to see it clearly. Because clarity dissolves confusion, and confusion is intimacy's greatest enemy. Next, train emotional courage. Courage isn't raising your voice, it's lowering your armor. It's choosing presence over withdrawal. Resentment thrives in avoidance, but intimacy grows in emotional exposure. Reminded himself, if it is endurable, then endure it. Stop complaining. This isn't about tolerating emotional neglect. It's about enduring the discomfort of difficult conversations rather than the slow decay of connection. You don't need perfect words. You need sincerity. Speak from responsibility, not accusation. Focus on how you feel, not how they failed. This shifts the nervous system from threat to openness. You also need to release moral superiority. Resentment often survives because it gives you a sense of being right. But being right will never make you desired. Stoicism warns against ego disguised as virtue. Epictetus taught that peace comes from letting go of what you cannot control, including your partner's reactions. You speak your truth not to force change, but because integrity demands expression. When you release the need to win, something softer becomes possible. Desire responds to safety, not dominance. Now let's talk about daily practices, because insight without repetition fades. First exercise, emotional inventory. Each evening, ask yourself one question. What did I feel today that I didn't express? Don't judge it, just observe it. This builds emotional awareness and prevents resentment from accumulating. Second exercise, voluntary vulnerability. Once a day, express a genuine feeling without attaching blame or expectation. This retrains your nervous system to associate openness with safety rather than rejection. Third exercise, resentment release. Sit quietly and repeat this line from Choose Not to Be Harmed, and you won't feel harmed. This doesn't excuse wrongdoing. It frees you from carrying poison that only harms you. Understand this deeply. Intimacy is not restored by seduction tactics or surface-level fixes. It returns when emotional tension dissolves, when resentment loosens its grip, when your presence feels grounded rather than guarded. Stoicism teaches mastery of the inner world first. When you stop reacting from old wounds, your energy shifts. You listen differently. You touch differently. You show up calmer, steadier, less needy. Desire responds to that stability. You are not powerless here. Emotional disconnection is not proof that love is dead. It's proof that unresolved emotions are asking to be acknowledged. And resentment, once faced, loses its authority. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Much of what blocks intimacy lives inside unexamined assumptions and silent narratives. When you confront them, they shrink. So take responsibility, not for the entire marriage, but for your inner discipline. Speak what you've been holding. Release what you've been gripping. Practice emotional honesty daily. Stoicism isn't cold detachment, it's warm clarity. And clarity, practiced consistently, rebuilds emotional safety. From there, intimacy doesn't need to be forced. It returns naturally as tension fades and connection finds room to breathe again. Number 2, chronic stress, burnout, and mental exhaustion. Chronic stress doesn't announce itself loudly. It creeps in quietly, settles into your nervous system, and slowly drains your capacity to feel desire, presence, and connection. You don't wake up one day deciding intimacy no longer matters. What happens instead is subtler and far more dangerous. Your mind stays switched on long after the day ends. Your body remains braced, tense, alert. And over time, the very system that's meant to experience pleasure goes offline. When stress becomes your baseline, intimacy becomes another demand instead of a refuge. Desire doesn't die because love disappears. It fades because exhaustion takes over. You live in a world that rewards constant output. Do more, push harder, stay available, solve everything now. That pressure doesn't just live in your schedule, it lives in your body. Stoicism understood this long before modern psychology gave it language. Warned, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. When your thoughts are saturated with deadlines, worries, and unresolved tension, your inner world reflects that chaos. and intimacy cannot thrive in a mind that never rests. You cannot access softness when your nervous system believes it's under siege. Burnout is especially deceptive because it disguises itself as responsibility. You tell yourself you're just tired, that things will improve later, that once the pressure eases, everything else will return naturally. But burnout doesn't wait politely for a vacation. It rewires your emotional responses. It flattens pleasure. It turns touch into effort. You begin to associate closeness with expectation, obligation, or another task you're failing to keep up with. And when intimacy starts to feel like work, avoidance becomes the body's defense mechanism. The Stoics were relentless about one truth: most of our suffering comes from mismanaged attention. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Chronic stress is often the result of living everywhere except where you are. You replay conversations that already ended. You worry about outcomes that haven't arrived. You carry yesterday's frustrations into today's body. That mental noise leaves no room for desire. Desire requires presence. Presence requires calm. Calm requires discipline. Mental exhaustion is not just being tired. It's the inability to switch states. You remain in problem-solving mode even in moments meant for connection. Your body doesn't know the difference between a work crisis and an emotional one, it just registers threat. Elevated cortisol suppresses libido. Constant vigilance blocks playfulness. You don't feel broken, you feel numb. And numbness feels safer than disappointment. So you retreat, not because you don't care, but because caring feels too costly. Stoicism doesn't ask you to suppress desire or deny intimacy. It asks you to remove the internal chaos that suffocates it. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." If your mind is owned by stress, if your energy is scattered across 100 invisible battles, intimacy becomes collateral damage. Reclaiming desire begins with reclaiming sovereignty over your inner state. This is where action matters. Not dramatic gestures, not forcing attraction, but daily disciplined practices that calm the nervous system and restore agency. Start with a simple exercise the Stoics practiced constantly, separating what is within your control from what is not. Each evening, write down the worries looping in your mind. Then draw a line. On one side, list what you can influence through effort, boundaries, or choices. On the other, place what you cannot. Make it physical, make it visible. This alone reduces mental load, because the mind relaxes when it knows not everything is its responsibility. Next, practice deliberate stillness. 5 minutes a day. No stimulation, no scrolling, no problem solving. Sit and breathe slowly, extending the exhale longer than the inhale. This tells your nervous system you are safe. You are not behind, you are not under attack. Reminded himself, nowhere can a man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. Stillness is not laziness. It is maintenance. Without it, intimacy has no soil to grow in. Another powerful habit is physical discharge of stress. Stoicism emphasized harmony between mind and body. Stress trapped in the body becomes resentment, irritability, and withdrawal. Move daily with intention. Not to punish yourself, not to chase validation, but to release stored tension. When the body softens, desire follows naturally. You don't need to force anything. You simply remove what's blocking it. You must also confront the belief that exhaustion is noble. Burnout is not proof of commitment. It is evidence of misalignment. Seneca warned against this trap when he said, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." If you give all your energy to survival, there is none left for connection. Start setting boundaries that protect your recovery. Protecting your energy is not selfish. It is essential. Intimacy requires surplus. You cannot give what you do not have. There is also an emotional component you must address honestly. Chronic stress often turns unspoken resentment inward. You may feel unseen, unsupported, or overwhelmed, but instead of articulating it, you shut down. Stoicism teaches clarity, not silence. Practice numbing your internal state without drama. Write it out. Strip it of blame. Focus on facts and sensations. This restores emotional circulation. Where emotion flows, desire has a pathway. Most importantly, stop treating intimacy as something you must get back. That framing alone adds pressure. Desire is not a switch you flip. It's a response to safety, presence, and vitality. When those return, intimacy follows without force. Epictetus advised, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Decide to become someone who protects their inner calm. The actions will align naturally. You are not broken. You are overloaded. And overload dulls even the strongest bonds. The Stoics believed that a tranquil mind was the foundation of a good life. Not a perfect life, a stable one. If you reduce the noise, regulate your energy, and reclaim mastery over your inner world, desire does not need to be chased. It reawakens on its own, quietly, steadily, like a signal returning once the interference is gone. Start today. One boundary, one moment of stillness, one conscious release of stress. Mental isn't built by enduring more pressure, it's built by refusing to let pressure rule you. When you do that, intimacy stops feeling like another demand and starts becoming what it was always meant to be, a place of rest, connection, and renewal. Number 3, loss of polarity and sexual tension. When intimacy dries up, it rarely disappears overnight. It fades quietly as polarity erodes. Sexual tension doesn't vanish because you stopped loving each other. It vanishes because the dynamic between you softened into something neutral, predictable, emotionally flat. And if you're honest with yourself, you can feel it. That edge that once existed, the contrast, the pull, the subtle friction, is gone. What remains is comfort without charge, familiarity without spark. You're still present, still loyal, still responsible, but something vital is missing. Stoicism teaches that nature thrives on balance, not sameness. When balance collapses, desire follows. Polarity is the invisible force created by contrast. It lives in presence, direction, decisiveness, emotional steadiness. When you abandon these qualities, often without realizing it, you don't just lose attraction, you lose tension. And tension is not conflict. It's energy. It's what keeps desire alive. When your mood rises and falls based on external approval, when you over-explain, over-accommodate, or seek reassurance instead of embodying certainty, the dynamic shifts. You move from grounded to reactive, from solid to negotiable. Stoics warned against this long before modern psychology ever named it. As Epictetus reminded, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Translation: stop chasing validation. Desire cannot grow in a space where approval-seeking dominates. You may believe being agreeable keeps the peace, but peace without polarity becomes stagnation. Sexual energy requires direction. It requires you to stand firm in who you are, not dissolve yourself into constant emotional availability. When everything about you becomes predictable, when your presence feels more like background noise than a force, attraction naturally retreats. This is not cruelty. It's biology aligned with psychology. Stoicism doesn't teach suppression, it teaches mastery. And mastery is deeply attractive. Loss of polarity often begins when you stop leading yourself. You stop honoring your boundaries, your discipline, your inner standards. Instead of acting from principle, you react from fear, fear of conflict, fear of withdrawal, fear of disapproval. Warned, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. When your thoughts are filled with anxiety about being desired, your energy reflects that neediness. And neediness suffocates tension. Desire needs space, mystery, self-possession. This doesn't mean becoming distant or cold. It means becoming centered, calm, unmoved by every emotional ripple. Stoicism calls this not apathy but freedom from emotional chaos. When you stop chasing responses and start embodying stability, polarity begins to return. Desire does not respond to pleading. It responds to presence. When you are emotionally regulated, when you don't overshare, or when you allow silence to exist without rushing to fill it, something shifts. The dynamic breathes again. You might notice that the more you try to fix the lack of intimacy through words, explanations, or reassurance, the worse it feels. That's because attraction isn't logical, it's experiential. Stoics understood this. They emphasized being over persuading, character over performance. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." And freedom, emotional, psychological, internal, is magnetic. When you reclaim that freedom, tension has room to re-emerge. Polarity also dies when roles blur into sameness. When everything becomes shared emotion, shared indecision, shared uncertainty. Desire thrives on contrast, not mirroring. Stoicism teaches you to occupy your lane with confidence, to stop apologizing for your nature, to act decisively, not defensively. When you hesitate, overconsult, or abandon your inner compass to keep harmony, you sacrifice polarity. And without polarity, intimacy becomes transactional or disappears entirely. Here, where action matters, insight alone changes nothing. Stoicism is a philosophy of practice. Start with a simple daily discipline. Practice restraint in expression, not silence, restraint. Speak with intention. Pause before responding emotionally. Let your presence do more than your words. Another exercise, remove one validation-seeking behavior each day. Notice where you seek reassurance, approval, or confirmation. Replace it with stillness. Let discomfort sharpen you, not soften you. Practice voluntary discomfort. Cold exposure, physical discipline, solitude, these are not punishments, they restore your sense of self-governance. When you feel grounded internally, you stop leaning outward for desire. That shift alone changes the dynamic. Advised, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Strength restores polarity, and polarity restores tension. Another practice, reclaim decisiveness. Make choices without excessive explanation, not from arrogance but from clarity. Certainty creates safety. Safety allows desire to surface. Also, detach outcome from effort. Do not act to get intimacy. Act because it aligns with your values. Desire follows authenticity, not strategy. Finally, stop measuring your worth through sexual response. Stoicism demands this detachment. When you free yourself from outcome dependency, you paradoxically become more desirable, because you're no longer negotiating your identity for approval. You stand as you are, composed, disciplined, emotionally sovereign. And that presence reintroduces the tension that intimacy feeds on. Loss of polarity is not permanent. It is a signal, a call to return to self-mastery. When you stop chasing desire and start embodying steadiness, when you trade emotional noise for calm authority, when you live from principle instead of reaction, tension has space to return. Not forced, not begged for, but naturally, as it always does when balance is restored. Number 4, overfamiliarity and routine killing desire. Overfamiliarity doesn't arrive loudly. It creeps in quietly, disguised as comfort, efficiency, sameness. At first, routine feels safe, predictable, manageable. But over time, that same predictability dulls desire. Not because something is wrong with you or your partner, but because desire feeds on tension, polarity, and presence, and routine slowly starves all three. You stop seeing each other. You start anticipating instead of discovering. You know what comes next, so your body stops leaning forward. The Stoics warned about this long before modern psychology put words to it. Wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." When your days are dyed with sameness, your desire follows suit. You may not realize it, but familiarity without intention breeds emotional laziness. Not cruelty, not neglect, laziness of attention. You stop choosing each other actively and start coexisting passively. Conversations become logistical, touch becomes functional, presence becomes partial. Desire cannot survive in a space where nothing is at stake. When everything feels guaranteed, nothing feels earned. This is not about novelty for novelty's sake. It's about aliveness. Desire wants to feel met, not managed. And routine, when left unconscious, turns you into roommates sharing time instead of lovers sharing energy. Stoicism teaches that decay happens not through catastrophe but through neglect. Seneca warned, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Desire is no different. When you repeat the same patterns without awareness, you're quietly ending attraction while assuming it should magically persist. That assumption is the trap. You don't maintain desire by demanding it. You maintain it by becoming someone who generates it. And that begins with reclaiming intentionality in how you show up, physically, emotionally, energetically. You must understand this clearly. Routine itself is not the enemy. Unconscious routine is. The Stoics didn't reject structure, they mastered it. They believed discipline creates freedom, but discipline without reflection becomes rigidity. When your relationship runs on autopilot, desire checks out, not out of rebellion but boredom. The nervous system stops responding when nothing changes internally. You stop surprising yourself. And when you stop surprising yourself, you stop being surprising to anyone else. Ask yourself, when was the last time you showed up deliberately instead of conveniently? When did you last engage with presence instead of habit? Desire is deeply tied to awareness. Epictetus reminded us, "No man is free who is not master of himself." If your actions are predictable because they're unconscious, you're not choosing, you're repeating. And repetition without intention is dead weight on attraction. Overfamiliarity also erodes polarity. When everything is shared, explained, exposed, and predictable, mystery dies. This doesn't mean secrecy. It means maintaining inner depth. It means not narrating every thought, not dissolving your individuality into the relationship. Stoicism values self-containment, strength, inner sovereignty. Desire responds to someone who is grounded in themselves, not merged into routine. When you stop cultivating your inner life, you stop generating energy. And desire is drawn to energy, not availability. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Comfort is seductive, but eros is demanding. Desire doesn't reward stagnation. It rewards presence, edge, and vitality. If your days look the same, feel the same, and require nothing new from you internally, your body adapts by shutting down interest. This is biological and psychological, not moral, and it's reversible if you're willing to act instead of blame. The Stoics would never tell you to wait for desire to return. They would tell you to train your character until desire becomes a byproduct. Wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." Applied here, waste no more time analyzing desire. Become someone who creates it, not through tricks, through discipline, through self-respect, through presence. Start with this practice. For the next 7 days, remove autopilot. Choose one daily interaction where you slow down fully. No multitasking, no rushing, no performance, just awareness. Feel your posture, your tone, your breath. Notice how presence alone changes the energy you bring into the room. This is Stoic mindfulness in action, not passive but embodied. Next, practice voluntary discomfort. The Stoics believed comfort weakens the soul. Do one thing daily that breaks your routine physically or mentally, not for excitement but for aliveness, cold exposure, intense exercise, silence, solitude. Challenge yourself. Desire responds to someone who is internally awake. When you sharpen yourself, you sharpen attraction indirectly. Another exercise, reclaim mystery by reclaiming depth. Spend time daily cultivating something that has nothing to do with your partner. Read, train, reflect, build. Desire grows when you are full, not when you are fused. Seneca said, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." Stop dissolving into routine togetherness. Maintain your edges. Also, audit your language. Routine language kills erotic tension. Speak less but with weight. Respond instead of reacting. Silence, when grounded, is powerful. The Stoics understood restraint as strength. Let your presence do more than your words. Desire often reignites not through more communication but through better containment. Finally, drop entitlement. Desire is not owed, it is invited. When you assume it should exist without maintenance, you unknowingly poison it. Gratitude, another Stoic cornerstone, reorients your energy. Approach intimacy as something you earn daily through who you are, not something you claim through commitment alone. This is not about fixing your partner, it's about mastering yourself. When routine dulls desire, the Stoic response is not complaint, it is correction. Internal first, always. Change your posture toward life and desire responds naturally, not instantly, not magically, but inevitably. You don't need chaos, you need consciousness. You don't need novelty, you need presence. And when you choose intention over autopilot, desire doesn't have to be chased. It returns quietly, the same way it left, through attention. Number 5, poor communication about needs and boundaries. Poor communication about needs and boundaries doesn't usually announce itself loudly. It creeps in quietly, disguised as keeping the peace, as patience, as maturity. You tell yourself that silence is strength, that enduring discomfort is noble, that wanting less will somehow make things better. But over time, that silence hardens into distance. Desire doesn't die because love vanishes. It fades because clarity does. Intimacy requires truth, and when truth is, the body follows the mind into retreat. You may think you're being understanding by not expressing what you want. You may believe that avoiding difficult conversations protects the relationship. Yet Stoicism never taught avoidance. It taught courage. Wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Notice the simplicity. Needs unspoken are needs first by you, then by the relationship itself. When you don't communicate your boundaries, you silently train your partner to cross them. When you don't articulate desire, you slowly convince yourself you no longer have any. Sexlessness often grows where assumptions replace conversation. You assume your partner should just know. You assume your needs are inconvenient. You assume it's better to suppress than to disrupt. But assumptions rot intimacy from the inside. The Stoics warned against living in imagined narratives. Epictetus was blunt. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them. When you assume rejection before you even speak, you pre-reject yourself. When you assume conflict is dangerous, you mistake discomfort for harm. Desire cannot survive in a space where honesty feels unsafe. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors with clear instructions. When you don't set them, resentment fills the gap. You begin to withdraw emotionally. Your body follows. Sex becomes another unspoken tension rather than an expression of connection. And here's the quiet truth you may not want to face. When you don't respect your own needs, others unconsciously learn not to respect them either. Stoicism never advocated self-erasure. It demanded self-respect rooted in reason. Seneca warned, "He who is brave is free." Freedom here isn't rebellion. It's the freedom to speak without fear of your own voice. Poor communication isn't just about words. It's about timing, tone, and inner clarity. If you don't know what you need, you can't communicate it. If you feel ashamed of wanting closeness, passion, or reassurance, that shame will leak into silence. Stoic discipline begins internally. Before speaking, you must examine yourself. Ask plainly, what do I need, not to control another person but to remain whole? This isn't selfish. It's grounded. Desire expressed calmly is not pressure. It's orientation. You may notice that when communication fades, sex becomes transactional or disappears entirely. Not because attraction is gone, but because tension has replaced trust. Stoicism teaches you to remove excess emotion from communication, not humanity. Calm truth is powerful. When you speak without accusation, without desperation, without fear, something shifts. The goal isn't to force intimacy. It's to create the conditions where it can return naturally. Clear boundaries create safety. Safety allows desire to breathe. There's also the habit of talking around needs instead of numbing them. Hinting, joking, withdrawing, waiting. None of these are communication. They're avoidance in softer clothing. The Stoics valued precision. Say what you mean what you say, not loudly, not dramatically, simply and directly. When you avoid clarity, you turn sex into a guessing game, and desire does not thrive in confusion. Take a moment to notice how often you censor yourself, how often you think it's not worth bringing up. That thought is rarely about peace. It's about fear, fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of discovering that your needs might not be met. But avoiding truth doesn't prevent pain. It delays it, then compounds it. Stoicism asks you to face discomfort early while it's still manageable. No man is crushed by misfortune unless he has first been deceived by prosperity, Seneca wrote. Comfort without honesty is a fragile prosperity. Here's a practical exercise for you. Sit alone, no distractions. Write down what intimacy means to you now, not in theory, not in the past, but in your current body and mind. Don't justify it, don't edit it, just name it. Then write what boundaries protect that intimacy. What behaviors drain it? What silences erode it? This isn't for confrontation, it's for clarity. Stoics believed clarity precedes action. Next, practice verbalizing needs without emotional charge. Out loud, alone, calm voice, short sentences, no blame, no story, just truth. This trains your nervous system to associate honesty with steadiness instead of anxiety. When the moment comes to communicate, your body will already know how to stay grounded. Remember, you are responsible for your expression, not the reaction. Epictetus reminded us, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Translation: say what matters even if it feels awkward. Another exercise: observe how often you violate your own boundaries internally, agreeing when you mean no, staying silent when something feels off. These small betrayals accumulate. Sexual desire cannot grow in a landscape where you abandon yourself daily. Reclaiming boundaries reignites self-respect. Self-respect reignites attraction, first within you, then between you. This isn't about demanding sex. It's about restoring polarity through truth. Intimacy is not owed, but neither is silence required. When you speak from calm authority rather than neediness, you change the dynamic. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop shrinking your desires to fit someone else's comfort. That alone shifts energy in ways words can't fully capture. Stoicism teaches that you control your actions, not outcomes. You may communicate clearly and still face resistance. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you acted with integrity. Mental is not getting what you want every time. It's knowing you did not abandon yourself to avoid discomfort. A sexless marriage sustained by silence is not stability, it's stagnation. So take action, speak with calm precision, define your needs without apology, set boundaries without anger, release the fantasy that unspoken love survives indefinitely. It doesn't. Truth is the oxygen of intimacy. Without it, desire suffocates quietly. With it, even difficult conversations become acts of strength. And strength, when practiced consistently, has a way of bringing life back to places that once felt dormant. Number 6. One partner feeling unappreciated or taken for granted. When one partner feels unappreciated or quietly taken for granted, intimacy doesn't disappear all at once. It fades in small, almost invisible ways. You may not notice it at first. There's no dramatic argument, no clear breaking point, just a slow emotional withdrawal. Touch becomes functional, desire becomes distant, and sex, which once felt natural, now feels optional, heavy, or strangely exhausting. This happens because appreciation isn't a luxury in a relationship, it's oxygen. Without it, closeness suffocates. As wrote, "What we do now echoes in eternity." The small daily signals you send, your tone, your attention, your presence, echo loudly in the emotional body of your partner, even when nothing is said out loud. When appreciation disappears, the unappreciated partner doesn't suddenly stop caring. They stop offering, they stop initiating, they stop leaning forward emotionally, not out of spite but out of fatigue. Giving without being seen drains the spirit, and desire cannot survive where effort feels invisible. You may still share a house, a routine, even laughter, but beneath that surface something essential is missing. Sex is deeply tied to feeling chosen, valued, and emotionally safe. When someone feels reduced to a role instead of recognized as a person, attraction slowly retreats. Seneca warned, "Nothing is more honorable than a grateful heart." Gratitude isn't just polite, it's bonding. Without it, distance becomes the default. What makes this dynamic especially dangerous is that it often feels unintentional. You may believe love should be understood without being expressed. You may assume consistency equals appreciation. But the Stoics were clear. Intention does not replace action. Epictetus reminded us, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Love works the same way. If appreciation lives only in your head, it might as well not exist. And when one partner feels unseen long enough, their nervous system adapts. They stop expecting warmth. They stop associating closeness with reward. The body learns faster than the mind. Libido doesn't respond to logic, it responds to emotional conditions. Over time, the unappreciated partner may begin to feel emotionally alone while technically together. And when emotional solitude sets in, sexual desire has nowhere to land. Intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires safety. Feeling taken for granted erodes that safety. It sends a quiet message. Your effort is expected, not valued. That message hardens the heart, not consciously, automatically. And once the heart closes, the body follows. Stoicism teaches radical responsibility here. Not blame, responsibility. Again, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Silence can be untrue too. Silence can misrepresent care. You may be tempted to focus on frequency, techniques, or timing, but those are surface fixes. The deeper issue is emotional reciprocity. Desire thrives when appreciation flows both ways. Without it, sex feels transactional or burdensome. This is why pressure never works. You cannot demand desire from someone who feels emotionally depleted. Stoicism teaches you to look inward first. Ask yourself where you've grown comfortable instead of attentive, where you've replaced presence with assumption, where you've allowed routine to dull reverence. Comfort is useful, but unchecked comfort becomes neglect, and neglect, even unintentional, kills attraction. This is where action matters more than insight. Begin with deliberate appreciation, not grand gestures, not performative words, but consistent recognition. Train yourself to notice effort, not just outcomes, but intention. Stoics practiced active attention. Apply that here. Attention is appreciation in motion. Each day, make it a discipline to mentally note what your partner contributes emotionally and practically. Then express it simply, not dramatically, clearly, calmly. Let your tone carry sincerity, not expectation. You are not trying to get sex. You are restoring dignity. Desire often returns as a side effect of feeling respected. A powerful Stoic exercise you can adopt is negative visualization. Briefly imagine life without your partner's presence, not to induce fear but clarity. This practice sharpens gratitude. When you return from that mental exercise, speak from that awareness. Appreciation expressed from clarity feels different. It lands deeper. Another exercise is restraint. Resist correcting, fixing, or dismissing for one full day. Observe instead. This builds respect in your nervous system. When respect grows internally, it shows externally, and your partner will feel it long before you explain it. You should also examine entitlement, the silent killer of intimacy. Entitlement says love is owed, desire is owed, sex is owed. Stoicism rejects this mindset completely. Nothing external is owed to you, not affection, not attraction, not intimacy. Epictetus was blunt. Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to, rather, wish that what happens happens the way it happens. This doesn't mean passivity, it means humility. When you release entitlement, appreciation becomes genuine again. And genuine appreciation reopens emotional doors that pressure slammed shut. As appreciation returns, so does polarity. When someone feels valued, they relax. When they relax, they open. When they open, desire finds space to breathe again. This is not manipulation, it's alignment. Sexless marriages are rarely about sex. They are about emotional misalignment left unattended for too long. The good news is that appreciation is a skill, not a personality trait. You can train it. You can practice it. You can embody it daily. End each day with a brief Stoic reflection. Ask yourself, where did I acknowledge effort today? Where did I overlook it? No judgment, just awareness. Improvement follows awareness naturally. As said, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If your thoughts shift toward gratitude, your behavior will follow. And when behavior changes consistently, emotional climate changes. Desire does not need to be chased. It returns when the conditions are right. You don't fix a sexless marriage by focusing on sex. You fix it by restoring appreciation where it withered. Start there, quietly, intentionally, persistently. Let action speak before words, and remember, what you nourish grows. Number 7. Power imbalance and lack of respect. When a marriage turns sexless, it's rarely just about the physical. Beneath the silence, the cold distance, and the awkward avoidance lies something deeper, something that drains connection at the root. One of the most potent reasons: a power imbalance paired with a lack of respect. And if you're honest with yourself, you've probably felt it too. That slow erosion of equality, that nagging feeling that your voice doesn't carry the same weight anymore, or that your needs have started to feel like a burden instead of a priority. Don't ignore it. Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "You deserve to desire only that which is within your power to control." When you surrender your sense of agency in a relationship, you also quietly surrender the spark that keeps it alive. And over time, that surrender manifests not just emotionally, but intimately. Now let's be real. When one person holds more control, whether financially, emotionally, or socially, it creates a subtle hierarchy. The dynamic shifts. You may start walking on eggshells, compromising too much, fearing confrontation. The other person, knowingly or not, begins to expect that compliance. And guess what gets buried under all that imbalance? Attraction. Passion can't thrive where freedom dies. Respect is the soil where desire grows. When that soil is polluted with resentment or passivity, nothing beautiful can blossom. And if you're wondering why your partner seems uninterested in being close, the answer might not be about them withdrawing. It might be about how much space you've allowed them to dominate. You need to reclaim equilibrium, not by demanding or blaming, but by resetting your internal compass. A Stoic doesn't beg for respect, they embody it. You must start showing up with the quiet strength of someone who knows their worth. Speak with clarity. Set boundaries, not ultimatums. Stop justifying yourself for wanting intimacy. It's not weakness, it's a basic human need. If you're being emotionally dismissed, you don't need to yell louder. You need to withdraw your energy until you're met with mutual effort. That doesn't mean playing games. It means not entertaining one-sidedness. Your presence should be a choice, not an obligation. When your absence speaks louder than your arguments, people listen. Seneca wisely said, "He who is brave is free." You need the bravery to face discomfort, to stop pretending everything is fine, to stop tolerating power games that kill attraction. Many couples fall into the trap of unspoken roles, where one gives, the other takes, one initiates, the other avoids, one submits, the other controls. If that sounds familiar, here's your wake-up call. Intimacy isn't sustainable in a dictatorship, even a quiet one. You want passion, then build parity. Mutual effort, mutual emotional safety, mutual respect. Without it, you're just roommates pretending not to feel the distance. Now take a moment. Reflect on how often you've given in just to avoid conflict. How many times have you said it's okay when it was? How often have you felt ignored but brushed it off to keep the peace? That's not noble, it's self-erasure. And it has consequences. Every time you silence yourself, you chip away at your identity. Every time you avoid asserting your needs, you condition your partner to believe you have none. And when you become invisible in your own relationship, attraction vanishes. Not because you're undeserving, but because you've stopped showing up with strength. Start rebalancing today. Speak your truth with calm firmness. Drop the need to convince. Stop explaining your worth, it's not a debate. Instead, embody it in the way you carry yourself. Practice stillness when provoked. Withdraw when disrespected. Appreciate your own presence enough to not chase someone else's validation. When you begin to restore your inner balance, the outer dynamics will shift. You'll either witness your partner rise to meet you or reveal their unwillingness to. Either way, you win, because you're no longer participating in a structure where you feel small. You're standing tall, not with aggression, but with conviction. Remember, said, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. So don't mimic manipulation with more manipulation. Respond with poise. Build a life that excites you, independently of how someone else shows up. And in doing so, you'll reset the power dynamic, not through control, but through self-possession. If your marriage has become sexless due to this imbalance, you have more influence than you think. But it starts from within. Power doesn't have to be taken, it can be reclaimed. Respect doesn't have to be demanded, it can be commanded through presence. Practice showing up differently. Change the tone of the conversation. Show restraint where you used to react. Set a boundary where you used to bend. Offer your presence, not as a favor, but as a gift. One that should be received with gratitude, not entitlement. Want a practical exercise? For the next 7 days, don't complain, don't chase, don't emotionally beg, instead observe. Journal moments when you feel dismissed. Document how often you overgive. Then shift. Replace explanation with action. Replace emotion with clarity. Replace reaction with stillness. And slowly you'll notice, when you rebalance your inner posture, the relationship dynamic responds. This isn't about becoming cold, it's about becoming conscious. A Stoic knows you cannot control another's behavior, but you can always control how you respond to it. You deserve a relationship where love flows both ways, where intimacy is shared, not rationed, where respect isn't a reward, it's a baseline. Don't settle for a dynamic that shrinks you. Step back into your power. And if that feels unfamiliar, remember, it's not because you lost it, it's because you forgot how to stand in it. Reclaim it. Reignite it. Redefine what you allow. Your marriage might be sexless, but your spirit doesn't have to be. Begin again with strength. Number 8. Suppressed anger, criticism, or passive aggression. Suppressed anger doesn't vanish just because you ignore it. It sinks inward, it calcifies, and over time it quietly poisons desire. You may not shout, you may not slam doors, you may even tell yourself you're being mature by letting things go. But the body never forgets what the mouth refuses to say. Sexual intimacy requires openness, warmth, and a sense of safety. Suppressed resentment creates the opposite. It turns closeness into tension and touch into obligation. You feel it in the silence between words, in the hesitation before a glance, in the way affection starts to feel mechanical instead of alive. What you suppress doesn't disappear, it waits, and it expresses itself through distance. Criticism works the same way. When anger can't come out honestly, it leaks sideways. Sarcasm replaces sincerity. Passive aggression replaces clarity. You start correcting instead of connecting, judging instead of understanding. Each small jab may seem harmless, even justified, but they stack up. Over time, desire withers under constant evaluation. Nobody feels sexually open when they feel measured, analyzed, or quietly resented. The Stoics understood this deeply. Wrote, "What is not good for the hive is not good for the bee." When your inner world is hostile, the shared space becomes sterile. Intimacy cannot grow in emotional soil filled with unspoken bitterness. You might tell yourself the problem is physical, stress, time, fatigue, but often the real issue lives upstream in unresolved emotional friction. The body follows the mind. When anger is suppressed, the nervous system stays tense. Desire requires relaxation. Passion requires presence. Resentment keeps you braced, guarded, internally rigid. Even when the opportunity for intimacy appears, something in you pulls back, not consciously, automatically. This is why sexless marriages often aren't about sex at all. They're about emotions that never got air. Stoic philosophy doesn't teach suppression. It teaches clarity. There's a difference. Epictetus warned that emotions left unexamined rule us from the shadows. When you refuse to name your anger, it names your behavior instead. It decides how you show up, how you touch, how you withdraw. You may think you're keeping the peace, but what you're really doing is trading short-term comfort for long-term disconnection. Peace built on silence is fragile. It cracks quietly. If you want intimacy to return, you must first reclaim honesty with yourself. That doesn't mean emotional explosions or blame. It means courage. It means admitting privately at first that you're angry, that you're hurt, that something inside you feels unheard or dismissed. Seneca wrote, "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." Suppressed anger is suffering in advance every day without relief. Numbing it reduces its power, writing it down, sitting with it. Feeling it without judgment, this is not weakness, it is discipline. From there, you must retrain how you express discontent. Passive aggression feels safer, but it erodes trust. Directness, when paired with calm, rebuilds it. The Stoics emphasized speaking from reason, not impulse. That means stating what you feel without attacking character. It means owning your internal state instead of making it someone else's crime. This alone begins to soften the emotional atmosphere. Desire doesn't respond to pressure. It responds to safety. You also need to release the fantasy that your partner should just know what you're feeling. That belief keeps anger bottled. Stoicism rejects mind reading and entitlement. It asks you to focus on what is within your control, your words, your tone, your boundaries. When you choose clarity over silence, you reclaim agency. You stop outsourcing your emotional life to expectation and disappointment. This shift alone changes how you carry yourself. And desire is deeply responsive to presence and self-possession. There's a practical exercise here. Each day, ask yourself one question. What am I tolerating that I secretly resent? Don't explain it away. Don't justify it, just name it. Then ask a second question. What would calm, self-respecting expression look like here? You don't need to act immediately. The goal is awareness. Another exercise is voluntary restraint. When you feel the urge to criticize, pause, breathe. Replace the impulse to correct with a statement of feeling. This trains emotional honesty without aggression. Over time, your nervous system learns that truth doesn't require conflict. Another Stoic practice is negative visualization, not to breed pessimism but to sharpen appreciation. Imagine continuing as you are, years of emotional distance, polite routines, no spark, no hunger. Let that image sober you. Then imagine the alternative, an atmosphere where resentment is aired early, calmly, without venom, where desire isn't blocked by emotional debris. This contrast isn't meant to scare you, it's meant to wake you up. Sexual intimacy is not sustained by technique or timing. It's sustained by emotional cleanliness. Suppressed anger is emotional clutter. Clear it and desire has room to return, not instantly, not magically, but naturally. As reminded himself, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. The very anger you've been avoiding is the doorway back to connection, if you have the courage to face it, name it, and express it with discipline. This is your work, not to be louder, not to be harsher, but to be truer. Start today. Sit with what you've been avoiding, write it, breathe through it. Practice speaking without poison. Desire doesn't need to be chased, it needs space. Clear the emotional blockages and what felt dead may begin to move again. Number 9. Decline in self-care, confidence or attraction. At some point, often without a dramatic moment or a clear decision, something quietly slips. Not just desire, not just excitement, but the energy you once carried into the relationship, the way you moved through the world, the way you inhabited your own body and mind. A sexless marriage is rarely born from one argument or one bad phase. More often, it grows out of neglect, subtle, gradual, almost invisible neglect of yourself. And if you're honest with yourself, you can feel it. Not as shame, but as a dull awareness that you stopped showing up as the strongest version of you. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus warned, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Attraction doesn't respond to words or promises. It responds to embodiment. When self-care erodes, when confidence softens into complacency, when discipline dissolves into comfort, desire doesn't disappear out of cruelty. It fades because it no longer has something solid to attach itself to. You don't lose attraction overnight. You drift away from it by letting yourself drift away from your own standards. Self-care is not vanity. It is self-respect made visible. When you stop taking care of your body, your posture, your sleep, your movement, your presence, you're not just sending a signal outward, you're sending one inward. You're telling yourself that you're no longer worth the effort. Wrote, if you don't do what's right, don't expect strength. Confidence is built from repeated proof. Every small promise you keep to yourself reinforces your internal authority. Every promise you break erodes it. And intimacy can sense that erosion long before words are spoken. Attraction thrives on polarity, energy, presence, grounded certainty. When you abandon self-care, your nervous system dulls. Your eyes lose sharpness. Your voice loses steadiness. You become less embodied, more passive, more inwardly scattered. Desire doesn't respond to neediness or stagnation. It responds to grounded vitality. Stoicism never taught withdrawal from life. It taught mastery of oneself within it. Seneca reminded us, he who indulges in sloth is his own enemy. When you stop investing in yourself, you quietly become that enemy. Confidence doesn't come from domination or bravado. It comes from alignment. When your actions match your values, you radiate calm certainty. When they don't, insecurity leaks out through hesitation, through resentment, through unspoken expectations. Sexual energy is deeply tied to this alignment. If you feel disconnected from your own strength, your body registers it before your mind does. And intimacy becomes another place where that disconnection shows up as avoidance, tension, or silence. You might tell yourself you're tired, busy, stressed, overwhelmed, and sometimes that's true. But Stoicism asks a harder question. Are you disciplined or are you negotiating with comfort? Wrote, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. When you live as if there will always be more time, standards erode. When you live as if your time and vitality matter now, presence returns. Desire follows presence. This is not about pleasing your partner. That's a trap. Desire cannot be begged into existence. It must be invited by becoming solid again, grounded again, alive again. When you reclaim self-care, confidence returns as a side effect, not a goal. You stop seeking validation and start generating gravity, and gravity is attractive. There's also resentment hiding here, resentment toward yourself. When you neglect your health, your body carries the weight. When you neglect your growth, your mind stiffens. That resentment doesn't stay silent. It seeps into how you touch, how you speak, how you withdraw. The Stoics believed that inner disorder always reveals itself outwardly. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." A sexless marriage often mirrors a deeper loss of self-mastery. The good news is that this is reversible, immediately, not someday, now, but not through dramatic gestures, through quiet daily discipline, through rebuilding trust with yourself first. Start with the body. Move it daily, not to impress, but to inhabit it again. Treat movement as a ritual, not a task. Eat in a way that supports clarity, not numbness. Sleep like it matters, because it does. These are not lifestyle tips. They are acts of self-alignment. Next, rebuild confidence by keeping small, non-negotiable promises. One habit, one commitment, done daily, no debate. Confidence grows where consistency lives. You don't need motivation, you need rhythm. Seneca advised, begin at once to live and count each separate day as a separate life. Today is not preparation, it is the work. Practice deliberate presence. When you speak, speak fully. When you listen, listen without waiting to respond. When tension arises, don't flee into distraction. Stay, breathe, ground yourself. This presence changes how you're felt in a room. Attraction responds to felt presence, not effort. Here's a practical exercise. Each morning, ask yourself one question. What would a self-respecting version of me do today? Not the perfect version, the honest one. Then do one thing that aligns with that answer. One thing only. Stack those days. Watch how your posture changes, your voice, your patience, your energy. Another exercise. Remove one comfort that dulls you. Not forever, just temporarily. Replace it with something that sharpens you, movement, silence, reflection. Voluntary discomfort was a core Stoic practice because it restores authority over the self. When you prove to yourself that you can endure discomfort, confidence returns naturally. And finally, stop outsourcing your vitality. Attraction dies where responsibility is shifted outward. You are not owed desire. You cultivate it by cultivating yourself. Said, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Let yours be disciplined, grounded, alive. A sexless marriage is not always about sex. Often it's about absence of presence, of vitality, of self-respect. Reclaim those and everything else begins to move again. Not through force, through alignment, through becoming unbreakable quietly from the inside out. Number 10, sex becoming an obligation instead of desire. When sex turns into an obligation, something quiet but corrosive happens inside the marriage. Not all at once, not dramatically. It happens the way rust forms, slow, unseen, almost polite. You start feeling that intimacy is no longer chosen, it's scheduled. Not desired but owed, not pulled by hunger but pushed by duty. And the moment desire is replaced by obligation, the body may still comply, but the soul checks out. You can feel it. The energy is different. The warmth is thinner. The connection feels rehearsed, transactional, empty. You're no longer being wanted, you're being tolerated. And deep down, that does something to you. The Stoics understood this dynamic better than we give them credit for. Wrote, "What is not good for the hive is not good for the bee." When intimacy becomes a task, the hive suffers. Desire cannot be commanded. It cannot be guilted into existence. The moment sex becomes something you're expected to perform to keep peace, avoid conflict, or check a marital box, it stops being an expression of life force and becomes a chore. And chores do not awaken longing. They drain it. You don't crave what feels compulsory. You avoid it. You resent it, even if you don't say it out loud. You may notice that the more sex is discussed as a problem, the less erotic it becomes. The more it's negotiated, measured, tracked, or weaponized, the colder it feels. Desire is spontaneous by nature. Obligation is mechanical. And when the bedroom turns into a space of unspoken pressure where one person feels chased and the other feels evaluated, attraction quietly suffocates. You stop approaching intimacy with curiosity. You approach it with calculation. And calculation kills chemistry. From a Stoic lens, the issue isn't sex itself. It's attachment. Attachment to validation. Attachment to reassurance. Attachment to using intimacy as proof of worth, love, or security. Epictetus warned, if you want to be invincible, make sure you depend on nothing that lies outside your control. Desire is not something you can demand or extract. The more you try to control it, the more it slips away. When sex becomes an obligation, it's usually because one or both of you are trying to regulate emotions, fear, insecurity, loneliness, through physical closeness instead of inner stability. You can feel when sex is no longer an expression of desire but a tool for emotional regulation. It carries weight, expectation, silent contracts. The body senses that pressure immediately. Desire doesn't bloom under surveillance. It emerges in freedom, in polarity, in emotional safety without emotional debt. When intimacy becomes something you should do instead of something you want to do, the nervous system rebels. Withdrawal becomes a form of self-protection. What makes this especially dangerous is how normal it becomes. Obligation sex doesn't always involve refusal. Sometimes it involves compliance without enthusiasm, presence without hunger, touch without intention. And over time, that creates a feedback loop. One side feels undesired, the other feels pressured. Both feel misunderstood, both retreat. And the bed becomes a place of quiet disappointment instead of connection. Stoicism doesn't tell you to suppress desire. It tells you to understand it, to remove false stories around it. Seneca wrote, "Fire tests gold, misfortune tests the brave." A sexless marriage tests your relationship with desire itself. Are you seeking intimacy to feel chosen, or are you becoming someone who naturally inspires choice? Are you chasing closeness out of fear of loss, or are you grounded enough to let desire come to you freely? Obligation is often a symptom of fear, masquerading as responsibility. Here, where action begins, not outward pressure but inward correction. The first habit is reclaiming your self-command. You stop treating sex as a measure of your worth. You stop negotiating desire. You stop pleading silently for enthusiasm. Instead, you cultivate a life that is full, grounded, disciplined, and internally rich. Desire responds to gravity, not desperation. When you no longer need sex to feel whole, you become more attractive, energetically, emotionally, and psychologically. A simple Stoic exercise you can practice daily is voluntary detachment. For a period of time, remove sex from your internal bargaining system entirely. Not as punishment, not as withdrawal, but as liberation. Tell yourself, I do not pursue desire, I become worthy of it. This doesn't mean emotional coldness, it means calm presence. You engage without expectation. You touch without agenda. You speak without fishing. You allow space without fear. This alone often shifts the entire emotional field. Another practice is to audit your intentions. Before initiating or responding to intimacy, ask yourself, silently, am I doing this to give or to get? If the answer is to get reassurance, closeness, or validation, pause, breathe, regulate yourself first. Stoicism teaches emotional self-sufficiency, not emotional starvation. When intimacy is no longer a transaction, it has room to become playful again, alive again, chosen again. You also train non-neediness through discipline outside the bedroom, physical training, mental focus, solitude, purpose-driven work. The Stoics believe that mastery in one area strengthens mastery in all others. When your identity expands beyond the relationship, the pressure inside it decreases. Desire doesn't thrive in claustrophobia. It thrives in polarity, two whole individuals choosing each other, not clinging to each other. There's a paradox here that's uncomfortable but powerful. The less you require sex to feel secure, the more likely it is to return organically. Obligation dissolves when pressure dissolves, and pressure dissolves when you reclaim emotional sovereignty. Reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Sexlessness often isn't about libido. It's about emotional dynamics that quietly extinguish desire. End each day with a short reflection. Ask yourself, did I show up today from strength or from need? Did I try to extract something or did I embody something? This isn't about blame. It's about clarity. Stoicism isn't cold, it's clean. It removes the emotional clutter that suffocates intimacy and replaces it with calm confidence. When sex stops being an obligation, it can slowly become a choice again. Not forced, not negotiated, not demanded, chosen. And that shift doesn't begin in the bedroom, it begins in you. Before you close this video, remember this one Stoic truth from: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. A sexless marriage is rarely about the bedroom. It's about what slowly disappeared long before intimacy did: presence, polarity, self-respect, emotional leadership. And the uncomfortable truth is this: nothing changes until you do. Not by begging, not by arguing, not by chasing desire that can't survive desperation, but by reclaiming your composure, your standards, and your inner authority. If this video made you uncomfortable, that's a good sign. Discomfort is where clarity lies. You now see patterns you may have ignored for years. You recognize habits that quietly drained attraction. And most importantly, you now understand that intimacy is not something you demand. It's something you invite through who you become. The Stoics believed that a man who governs himself influences everything around him. When you rebuild your discipline, your calm confidence, your boundaries, and your sense of purpose, the dynamic shifts, whether your partner responds or not. And that shift alone changes your future. So don't just move on to the next video and forget this moment. Reflect, apply, choose one insight from today and live it consistently. If this resonated with you, like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs this message but won't hear it anywhere else. Your marriage and your life doesn't change by accident. It changes by decision.